Our topic today is why become a CRO, a certified CRO, and what does it take to get to be a certified CRO? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about what a CRO is not. There's a lot of myth going around, and a lot of people believe that yesterday I was the vice president of sales and marketing. Today I get new cards and I'm a CRO. That's not how it works. These are things that often, as the myth goes, people believe a CRO head of sales or head of marketing or head of business development or product development. Some people think CROs are head of customer service and satisfaction. Sometimes it's responsible for the big deals, head of sales ops, head of strategic accounts. And sometimes they think it's operational leadership roles. Well, operational leadership roles are different than being a CRO because they're responsible for today. They're the ones who have to create today's new product, today's big deal. And the CRO has a role in that, but it's not their daily job. So let's take a look at the thing that the CRO is responsible for, that nobody else in the company does unless the CEO has free time and decides they want to do these things. The CRO is responsible to create a revenue strategy. A revenue strategy is a very specific thing. It's the ability to answer and then deploy 5 specific questions. You're going to see those in a little while. The CRO also owns creating a revenue culture, creating and living a revenue culture. A revenue culture is that organization that is maximizing long-term profit. And it only can maximize long-term profit when it has already optimized its people first culture. Culture and revenue are not separate because it's the humans in your culture that are responsible for innovation, operational excellence, customer intimacy, scale. And so if your culture is not optimized, you're never going to maximize profit. The CRO also owns organizational-wide deployment of revenue strategy. One of the challenges in organizations is not all the silos play well together. The CRO's job is to make sure when it comes to revenue that the silos play well together. The CRO owns the resources required to fund the deployment of a revenue strategy. A CRO will never create a strategy that cannot be deployed because of lack of resource. That would be ridiculous. And since it's their job, they make sure that once they have a strategy, it's only complete when they can actually deploy it because they have the resources required. The CRO is also responsible for eliminating the cost of chaos. Now, if you're in a B2B company, and we've been studying this for over 30 years, B2B companies typically have a cost of chaos to produce revenue that ranges between 20 and 50% of top line. So if you're a $10 million B2B company, you're hand over fist throwing away chaos dollars of $2 to $5 million a year. It's the CRO's job to help you stop doing that. We call that dumb stuff. Help you stop doing dumb stuff. If you're a B2C, your chaos number is approximately half of that. Because chaos is a result of complex change, and B2B is typically more complex and got a lot more change. Chief Revenue Officer is responsible for two-way value transfer and profit. Oftentimes people think in terms of sales. And of course, sales is important, but sales is just an element of revenue, just like marketing and product development, and customer service, and a whole series of others. So it's the CRO who's responsible to make sure we're transferring compelling value to our ideal buyers. And when we transfer compelling value, ideal buyers will pay us. That so often we hear people say, well, we do this great stuff, but the buyer doesn't get it. It's a CRO's job to make sure the value we transfer to the buyer, they get it. Because if they don't get it, They won't pay you for it. The next one is the CRO is responsible for short-term revenue survival and long-term growth. Those operational jobs we showed on the first slide, they're responsible for short-term, but there's multiple ways to do short-term business. Some of those short-term ways negatively impact our future. And it's a CRO's job to make sure we don't do any of those things in the short term that negatively impact our future. Those negative short-term things are more dumb stuff that add to chaos. CRO is also responsible for organization-wide revenue metrics. Most organizations don't have any organization-wide revenue metrics at all. And if you have the correct ones, they not only tell you what you're doing now, but they actually help you predict what's going to happen going forward. The CRO also owns offer creation, management, metrics, and flow. Flow is the offer that you bring to the market. For example, we do certification of CROs, surprise. That's our offer. And how we measure that is the volume of it, the velocity, in other words, how fast does it go from I just met this potential organization to they're already a client. And then the final one is value. So when you're measuring your offer flow, what's the volume of offers? What's the velocity? And the value is how much the buyer is willing to pay you, both in the short term and over the long term. The next one is the CRO owns strategic revenue relationships. That's, do we have the right marketing partners? Do we have the right distribution partners? Do we have the right people who are helping us develop the right products that we turn into offers and take to our buyers? The CRO is the one who's responsible for the strategic creation of revenue partnerships. And finally, the CRO is responsible for all those people on the first page to be in alignment and consistent with deploying the strategy, because nobody else owns that. They all have marketing, sales, product development, engineering. They all have their own siloed fiefdoms. But when it comes to revenue, somebody's got to tie them together. That's the CRO's job. Now, if we now know what it isn't, and we know now what the responsibilities are for the CRO, nobody else in the company has, unless the CEO's got a lot of free time and knows how to do this. So why do we care? Why do you want a CRO? The answer is really simple. It's about money. It's money for the company. And the organization that has a CRO that is eliminating the cost of chaos, and just think if all you eliminated was 20% of the chaos, and you're a $10 million company, the CRO is helping you recover $2 million a year. Now, that's good, but the upside's even better, because that chaos means 20% of chaos means the humans that work for you in your organization, they're spending one day every week dealing with chaos. And all of us who've worked for other people can think of examples where, when I used to be a salesperson in Fortune 500 companies, we used to talk about the Sales Prevention Bureau. So our companies all had a Sales Prevention Bureau that just made it really hard for us to do business. Well, today we call that part of the cost of chaos. And so when you remove that chaos, all those people now have more time to do the job you actually hired them to do. So the first thing is you remove chaos. The second thing is removing chaos allows the talented people you hired to do their job. The other part of dollar in this is, if you're the one who's the CRO, you are one of the 3 highest paid people in your company. So there's not only money in this for your company, but if you know how to do this, there's money in it for you. So what does a CRO have to do when they get up in the morning and say, I'm going to be a CRO? What do I have to learn so I can do that? Well, I have to learn what living a revenue culture is all about. It's easy for me to say you have a revenue culture when you maximize profits after you've optimized your people first culture. Well, that sounds good, but how do you do it? The second thing is, and part of how you do it is you got to answer these strategic 5 revenue strategy questions, which you're going to see in just a minute. Because you can't maximize revenue if you don't have a revenue strategy. When I work for many companies, we have a goal. Somebody says, okay, your number for next year is 20 million. Go get it. And that's the extent of the strategy. They're counting on me to go get it. Well, I got to build a strategy or I can't manage my team. I can't bring in outside help to do marketing or do partnerships if I don't have a strategy that they can align to. So the CRO's got to get good at that. And they got to learn how to always do smart stuff. Make the right decisions. You don't have to make perfect decisions because in today's world, it moves so fast. If you had perfect decisions today, tomorrow they wouldn't be perfect anymore because something changed. What you have to do is keep making smart decisions every day, decisions that move you in the right direction, not doing the wrong direction better. You got to be moving in the right direction. And that's a CRO's job. And then if you really want to be a CRO, you got 2 choices. One is you can take this outline I'm going to give you and you can figure it out. Or if you want to, we certify people in 7 weeks. And at the end of that period of time, you're ready to go do this work. So what is this work? What does this look like? If you're going to have an organization and you're going to be a CRO in that organization, the first thing you better figure out is who is your ideal buyer. Nobody has enough resource to think they can call on every customer in the world and consider everybody their customer. Even if you want to argue theoretically they could be, financially you don't have the resources to do it. So you have to decide who's that ideal buyer that if we do business with them, they'll get what we do. They'll see and feel and experience the maximum value that we're transferring to them. And they are going to be with us for a long time. But if I don't know who that ideal buyer is, I'm stopped. So we're going to figure out as a CRO who our ideal buyer is, because everything else falls inside of that. So now if I know the ideal buyer, the next thing I got to do is I got to do that 5-question revenue strategy. And it's not too hard. It really starts with the idea that we have a purpose. Every business has some form of purpose. And there's 2 ends of that purpose string. One end says, I'm in business to make as much money as I can in the shortest period of time. If some of you had a huge inventory of masks or cleaning supplies in the middle of 2020, you could make a ton of money in a short time with big markups and high demand and no sales cost. Just let somebody know on eBay you got it and it's gone. That's what we call mercenary selling. And it's a fine thing to do if you can get in that position and that makes you happy. But you create a different kind of business when you're a mercenary company and all you're thinking about is your income. You're not thinking about your staff and you're not thinking about making your buyer's world better. You're in a win-lose environment and that's okay. It's a legitimate thing to do, but it's different than the other end of the string. The other end of the string says, we're in business and we're going to make as much money as we can by making the world a better place. Now, you can make the world a better place an infinite number of ways. You can be all over green or energy, but you can also be making it a better place because you're making a better machine tool that allows your customers to do a better job satisfying their customers, or you're cutting down safety problems because your particular product doesn't ab-bend or doesn't mess up and make other people at risk. So you get to make a decision. Am I here for the long term and I'm going to make the world a better place and a ton of money while I do it? Or am I here for the short term? I'm going to make as much as I can, and when my bubble bursts, I'm going to move on to Uber or whatever else I do. So start with purpose. Once you know your purpose, now you get to decide and tell the world what is the brand promise. What's the promise you make to the world that when they do business with you, this is what they can experience. Now, we can use Disney as a quick example. And Disney's about happiest place on earth. So their brand promise is whatever you touch at Disney, whether you're on a cruise ship, you're at a park, you're at a movie, we're going to make that the happiest place on earth for you. And that's part of their purpose. And that is their brand promise. The second part of the 5-question strategy is, what's the customer problem that you solve for the customer no one else solves? Now, if you're like everybody else, you're sitting there saying, well, what I do, I got 20 competitors that do the same thing. Well, that's at the tactical level. If Disney used that thinking, they'd say, well, we have some boats and, you know, we create some film and we got some parks with some rides. That's at the tactical level. If you're going to have a strategic revenue strategy, you got to figure out what's the problem you solve that includes your business model. It includes your purpose. It typically includes something much bigger than the what you do. Those are the first 2 strategic questions. They're hard because we're not trained to think that way. That's why you need a CRO to help you think through those 2 questions, because that's where the money is in answering those 2 questions. Once you answer those 2, then it starts to get easy. What niche or niches will you dominate in order to, by solving these problems and making this brand promise? If you're in markets, in niches that you do not plan to dominate, you have decided to be in a niche and be like everybody else that kind of does what you do. If you make that decision, your buyers will make the decision about you based on price. Because if you're not any different, if you don't tell the world you're any different, if you don't act any different, the only thing they can assume is you're like everybody else. Number 4, 4th question is, who's your ideal buyer? The ideal buyer is never a company. The ideal buyer is a human being that is experiencing the problem you solve and they want it to go away and they are compelled by your brand promise. That's your ideal buyer. That's the person that won't be asking you for a 10% discount. They'll be asking you for more services, more ideas, more ways to engage with them over time. And then finally, the 5th question is, what's your key offer for dominating the niche? Now, just real quickly, offers isn't the term most of us use. But if you think about being a buyer, as a buyer, you're always looking for the offer. You look at somebody's product and that's cool, but then your next question is, well, you haven't told me the price, part of the offer. You haven't told me whether you take MasterCard, part of the offer. You haven't told me how quick I can get it, part of the offer. You haven't told me about warranty. You haven't told me about installation. You haven't told me about ongoing service. You haven't told me about upgrades. So offers are a big deal from the buyer's frame of reference, and that's what they're thinking about. Often your product isn't as important to them as the offer that surrounds it. So let's take a look at how these questions get answered in real life. Oops. Technical glitch. Get there. Okay, one more. There we go. In real life, I'm going to show you how these get answered for my company. For my company, the brand promise, we provide a business context that controls revenue. The problem we solve that no one else solves, how to make revenue growth predictable. What's the niche we dominate? Complex B2B enterprises committed to long-term revenue growth. Who's our ideal customer? Employees in complex B2B enterprises who are responsible for continually producing more profitable revenue. And what's our key offer? We certify enterprise teams in CRO thinking to achieve long-term predictable revenue growth by living a revenue culture. Those are the kinds of answers that now when you have business partners, they know this is who you are. They know they need to align to you. And so that's that CRO's job of making sure that happens. When you're building the offer, the CRO is responsible, of course, we know that there's a basic product or service in the middle, but we also have to make sure that that product or service and this offer you're going to create aligns to the brand promise. And it also has to be consistent with the problem you solve for buyers. If you're creating an offer that doesn't align to your brand promise, or it isn't consistent with the problem you're going to solve, your brand starts to fall apart and your customers are confused. But worst of all, your team's confused. Your team doesn't understand. Yesterday, you told me we do this. Today, you're telling me this offer does that. I don't get it. That's where chaos comes from. Then the next piece is we need to be sure that this offer is going to help us dominate a niche. And we need to make sure that it adds compelling value to the ideal buyer. So one of the things organizations without CROs don't talk about is they don't think about when we're building this offer, we're creating this product, we're changing our process, what's the value impact to our ideal buyer? That's the CRO's job. So what have we done so far? We've identified the fact we have an ideal buyer. We just answered our 5 revenue strategy questions. The next thing, if you run teams, you got to think about, all right, I got this stuff at a high level. How do I drive it down to my people? How do I make sure my people know what to do and they know what not to do? Well, that's what we call the true north. Once we know what our strategy is, we know who our ideal buyers are, we're going to create a true north. That's a very simple concept. The true north says, here's our strategy. That's the nugget of gold we're going after. And anytime my organization moves north, it's moving toward that goal. It's going there because I'm adding value to the buyer, and that's adding margin to me. Anytime I let my team not go north, I'm subtracting value from my buyer and subtracting margin from me. Now, once I know my strategy, I get to tell my team how we go about doing this. We are always going to be a partner. We're always going to be trustworthy. We're going to be transparent. We're going to help buyers monetize value. Those are things above the horizon line. Those are things all going north. Likewise, I also have a group of things I don't want my team to do. I don't want my team to go in and cross-sell. Now, if I'm you, I'm sitting there thinking, cross-sell, that's how I grow inside a company. Cross-selling is from the seller's frame of reference. If you're a CRO, you realize you want the results of cross-selling, but you get those results by helping the buyer add more value. When you help the buyer add more value, they start to take up more of your services. That looks like cross-selling or upselling or extended wallet share, but it's not the selfish version. That, remember when we said you can have 2 purposes? You can be mercenary, and mercenary is doing wallet share, they're pitching, they're cross-selling, they're upselling, they're product focused. If we're going to have a CRO and we're going to be focused on adding value to our buyer, we're going to get really clear about what we do or we don't do. And the power in that is we know when to say no. CROs know that you get more referrals from businesses you say, no, I cannot do that with you. And you say it in the right way than from current customers. So saying no is a great lead generation activity when it's done correctly. So where are we now? We've identified ideal buyers. We've answered our 5 strategy questions. We've created a true north that says there's behaviors that we do that help us become who we want to be, and there's behaviors we don't do. Now we're going to take a look at what we call Bell Curve 2.0. Bell Curve 2.0 basically says we have to know where to apply those first 2 things, where to apply the strategy, where to apply the true north. Well, this is a real simple picture. Some of you are familiar with this as a diffusion of innovation curve, but what it really says is that every product or every service that gets launched and every market that gets launched starts over here on the left, and down here in this little corner are innovators and early adopters. And those are people who buy new stuff. They buy things that others say, well, I haven't heard of that before. I'm just concerned. I got to make sure who owns it now. Who can I call for a reference? So that's who lives over here on the left. Who lives over here on the right are laggards, late adapters. And when you look at the big picture, what you find is the difference between the left-hand side and the right-hand side. People on the right are buying stuff. They think they don't need anybody to make them smarter. They think they know as much as they need to know. What they want to hear from you is how much does it cost and do you have it? The people on the left are buying your brain. They're buying the fact you know something they don't know. And they're happy to pay you for that knowledge because that knowledge allows them to solve a problem they couldn't solve without you. And it allows them to do it now. Once CROs understand this process, they want to understand where your company fits on this bell curve because pricing is determined by where you fit on the curve. Over here on the left, we're pricing based on brain. On the right, we're pricing based on cost of manufacture. On the left-hand side, often your margins 7 or 8 times what it is on the other side. So CROs are going to help you figure out, and the research will tell you very clearly, wherever you are on this curve, you can successfully do business one track, right or left of wherever it is you are. If you're in 2, you can do business in 1 and 3. If you try to do business in 4 and 5, you'll lose money and you'll start to create more of that chaos we talked about earlier. So the CROs helped us identify who our ideal buyer is. They've helped us identify our strategy. They've created our true north, our bell curve, and now we're going to move to the roadmap. The roadmap is how we move these offers from down here all the way along this map so that we can increase the volume, the velocity, and the value, which is where our money comes from. And if you think about your organization, this part of the organization is mostly marketing, this is selling, and this is our delivery component. They can't live in silos. If the CRO is going to be successful, these have to work as one. This is one roadmap. And the goal is to get people to find you, investigate you, early qualify you, move to the point your sales team is talking to the right people that have that problem. Remember, ideal buyer is that human being that has the problem, wants it solved, is compelled by your purpose and your brand promise. And once you get them on board, CROs do not look at transactions as single items. Transactions are a step into a long-term partnering relationship with a client. So you've seen what it takes for a CRO to do their job. They're going to help you find ideal buyers. They're going to make sure you have a revenue strategy. Your team's going to know how to deploy it. They're going to know where to deploy it. And they're going to know the roadmap that all your offers are going to go across. The result of that is you end up living a revenue culture where you're maximizing profits because you first optimized a people-first culture. So now, what does this mean to you? This is your roadmap. If you want to be a CRO, this is your map. The first thing you've got to decide is that you're going to be committed to this process. And if you're committed to this process, you get to decide one of two things. I'm either going to do what Rick did, and that is, it took me 30 years to get this process identified and mapped and researched and validated, or you can decide you're going to want to become a certified CRO so that you can start this in 7 weeks and know how to start to apply it. Whatever you decide, you got to declare your purpose about doing this. you have to answer the 5 questions just like we talked about. You got to finish your true north. One of the most important things we can do is let the world know what our purpose is and what we stand for and the problem we solve. As soon as we don't know those things, people don't trust us. We need to apply Bell Curve 2.0 so that we're only talking to people that are either in the track we're in or one track right or left, because those are the ones who will gladly pay us what we're worth. We don't want to be dealing with the ones that don't want to pay us. And then we have to establish our own offers along our own roadmap. Each of us as a CRO may be approaching this for a different kind of client and a different kind of industry. So we got to figure out how we apply this in our world. And maybe the most important thing of all is this is continuous improvement. Whatever we're doing today, the world is changing so fast and so much that we have to constantly be honest with ourselves, look ourselves in the mirror and say, what's not working as well as I want it to? So it's our opportunity to continuously improve ourselves, just like we improve our clients and just like we improve the companies we work for. We've got to help them recognize this process is continuous. It's not something you lock down and leave it. So that gives you an idea of why you would want to be a CRO and what it takes to become one. And Cherie will take a look at anything that you put in chat. So if you want some of this emailed to you, we'd be happy to do that. Or you can reach out to our website. You can send me a direct email or call. You can get the slides, today's video. And we also do podcasts twice a month on living a revenue culture so that you can be learning more about that. And we do revenue blogs every week. And if some of you want to explore being a chief revenue officer, of course, we'd be happy to talk to you about that. So this is a time to put questions in there that we can answer. And let's just have a conversation for a while.
Good stuff. So Rick, I do have a few questions for you in the meantime while everyone is posting their questions, or maybe they would actually like to, speak to you live. But before we get there, so what is the impact of living a revenue culture on a business over time?
Yeah, today one of our biggest two big challenges is getting and keeping the employees we have and getting and keeping our customers. Drucker said the purpose of a business is to create and keep a customer. And when you live a revenue culture, you are going to maximize your profit because you're keeping your customers and you're keeping your staff. Your customers want to deal with the same people. They want to deal with people who understand them and took the time to really match the value you're transferring to the value they can apply. Oftentimes we sell people things that we think are really cool and they don't get it. And we force them to have to figure it out themselves. So the living a revenue culture is where we're really focused on that, creating and keeping a customer, because our team is in there for the long term and we're all focused on the same purpose.
That is great, thank you. Okay, so we're operating a business. We are an operating business. So how do we start doing these 4 things that you mentioned earlier?
That's a great question. And that it goes beyond, we're defining this today for the CRO, but any one of you, if you're not either the CEO or about to be a CRO, you can apply everything we talked about here. You need to know who your ideal buyers are. It's just a matter of, I'm a cost accountant by undergraduate education. I only got so much time. I only got so much money. If I don't know who my ideal customer is, I'm just flailing around talking to anybody, hoping I find an ideal customer where I'm hoping it all works out. So whatever job I've got, whether I'm in marketing or I'm doing product development or I'm doing selling, first thing I got to do is identify who I think that person is. Then the second thing is I got to figure out, if they want to hear me, and we know today 70% of buyers don't want to talk to sellers. The buyers today believe they can make their decisions based on the internet. I mean, decisions of $50,000, $100,000, they believe they can make without talking to a buyer. So if that's true, how do we make the fact that we really have something important to say to them, how do we get that across to them? Well, it's to answer those 5 questions. We have to have this brand promise that they go, wow, that's different. The problem you solve, you're right. Nobody's solving that problem for me. I got to hear more. I'm not sure I believe you, but I got to hear more so I can find out if I believe it. So whatever your job is, this circle map applies to you. And that true north, the things that are below the line, we should never do. We should never call on a customer because we want more wallet share from. I mean, how many of you as buyers want anybody to call you when their express purpose is more of your wallet? Nobody wants that. So all the things we just talked about work as well for individuals. And you can start any place on that circle where it works today, and then just keep completing the circle.
That is great, Rickman. Thank you. And you've also answered a question, why are the 5 questions so important? So that's great. Someone's actually asked, how long is your certified CRO course, the price, and can it be done remotely? I'm pretty sure when it comes to costing and that you can speak individually to people, I'm not sure how, but can it be done remotely? And how long is it?
Yes, it is always, well, I shouldn't say it. 90% of the time it is remote. And it's remote because we set up a landing page every time we do one of these programs. And so everything that happens is on your landing page. So you have all the material, you have all the videos, you have all the conversations. So that becomes a library for you to start applying over your career. So we use Zoom, we library everything. It's 7 weeks, it's 3 hours a week. There's probably about an hour and a half homework as well. So you're looking at a 4 to 5 hour a week commitment for 7 weeks. And it is virtual. We do some individual programs. Today, we do more enterprise programs where we do teams of people. Sometimes we do C-suite, and sometimes we do operational leaders. Sometimes we do both combined. But 7 weeks, the price starts at $4,000 a certification. If you have more people, there is a rate for 10 versus 1. So it does go down as the number go up.
Okay, good stuff. All righty, so another question. How do the 5 questions in the True North discussion differ from the strategic focus of a CMO?
Well, a good strategic CMO is probably covering a lot of them. I hope they are. I mean, when I've met really good ones, they are. What's different about this is that it's a discipline. And there's hundreds of people, now thousands of people around the world, who, when you say a revenue strategy, they are expecting you're going to talk about those 5 questions. And their teams are expecting that they're going to deploy those 5 questions. So when I've met CMOs that do approximately this, it's a one-off. And it's a great one-off, but it's a one-off. And this is organization-wide. CRO is going to make sure that the CFO is participating in these 5 questions. And we're going to make sure that the head of operations is participating in these 5 questions, because you can't deploy it, you can't fund it, you can't deliver it if all of those people are not part of the game. So good CMOs probably are doing some or maybe all of this, but this is deployed organization-wide in a very intentional, consistent way.
Okay, great. Hey, listen, if anyone else has a question, please unmute yourself and ask, or you can also wave your hand. I just have two more in the meantime, if no one else is going to ask right now. So does all of this work for little companies as well as larger companies?
Amen. One of the things we talked about earlier was the cost of the chaos to produce revenue. And if you think about complexity creates the greatest amount of chaos. So the greatest chaos exists after you're bigger. Every time you add a person, you add complexity. Every time you add a different product, a different service, you're adding complexity. So when you start small, if you understand, if you just follow this circle, and that's how you start, you don't build in chaos because, well, that's the way we do it. That's the way we've always done it. Or I hired somebody who came in from outside and they do it different than we do, but they're my new boss, so I'm doing it their way. So when you start this, when you're small, you get a huge amount of additional leverage from starting it small. And it gets you into the market faster, requires less money on your part to get into the market. And it's easier for you to attract both employees and easier to attract customers.
Okay, great. Anyone have questions? You're absolutely welcome to unmute and ask. I just have one more, Rick. So as a B2B company, does this work for a B2B company as well as B2C companies?
Yes. The difference between, the science is the science, and the things we're talking about work the same in both B2B and B2C. The big difference is B2C companies are typically less complex than B2B companies. And not only are they less complex, but they are highly competitive. If you're a grocery store, a restaurant, a retail store, you have hundreds or thousands of competitors. And if you have a lot of chaos in your business, if you don't have a good strategy in your business, you don't last very long. So if you're a B2C company that's ongoing, you're probably less chaotic than most B2B companies. B2B companies have more margin. And typically they're a little more individually unique. And so consequently, they may have, some differences that their end buyers, just have to buy from them because they have the right widget. So B2B is typically at least twice as complex. They have twice as much chaos. And that's the big difference between B2B and B2C.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. All right, I think from my side, that's about as many questions I picked up, people sending them to me privately as well as on the chat. So I think everyone's been wonderful and trying not to be chaotic, but you're absolutely welcome to unmute and start asking questions if you have any. Otherwise, Rick, take it away. How do you want to handle the rest of this?
Okay. Who's got something they'd like to know? Well, if nobody's got anything you'd like to know, I'd like to invite anybody to reach out or send an email or put it on the chat that you'd like a copy of this, or to reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you and love to talk to you about, we've got at least one of our certified people online today. I think, Wayne, are you still there?
Yes, I am, Rick.
Okay. Anything you'd like to add?
But, perhaps people would be interested in if you could quickly explain, the CR, you've gone through all of the high level, what a CRO does. Run us through a quick sample day of a CRO, or a consultant, because I'm sure some of these people are consultants. How does it work for a consultant CRO going into a company, we know we want to, check what their, 5, revenue purpose questions are, check out their true north, see how that they're operating, finding where the chaos is, where they're siloed in silos, and how do you get out of the silos, and you're putting together all of, that. Typically, do you deal with the individual departments, or do you try to start with the key components and then work your way through?
Great question, Wayne. And Wayne is one of the people who was, I think, certified in 2016 or 17. So he already knows the answers to those, but I appreciate the question. If you're going to be a consultant and you're going to work with your clients on this, the power in this comes from creating common language and common understanding. So every time possible, we want to work organization-wide. We don't just want sales, we don't just want marketing, we want finance, we want operations, we want product development, customer service, because each of them, before we start certification, has a unique way to look at their customer. And they have their own unique language. If you think about engineering language versus finance language versus marketing, sales, customer service, they have no common words that are commonly understood by all of them. So the first thing we do is we do go through those 5 questions so that all of a sudden, whatever their silo is, they now start to speak the same language. And you might imagine in that bell curve conversation, if we say to somebody, what track is this prospect in on the bell curve? A simple question. When the answer come back, they're track 3, that's dead center in the curve. Now everybody has an understanding of approximately what that buyer wants, how they do business, and how we can communicate to them so that they can understand us. And now engineering realizes these people are already fairly, they don't need all our brain, they have some of their own, and they're probably going to come to us needing technical help, but not us to do the design for them. They've probably done the design for themselves. So we can ask one question that's 1 sentence long, we can get a 1-word answer, and everybody in the room knows what's going on. And the same thing with the True North. When we are having a conversation about how we might approach a strategic opportunity, and we got engineering in the room, we got finance in the room, we got C-level in the room, and we can start to ask questions about, what's their frame of reference and what's the language we can use that's above the line that's going to add value to that buyer. And everybody can have the same conversation. When we go through those kinds of organizational efforts, as Wayne was talking about, we've often had people put stickies on the wall every time the people in the organization see a point of chaos. And one client at the end of 2-day strategy had 74 stickies on the wall. They identified 74 points of chaos. The power in that is 2 weeks later, when I came back, they'd already removed 20. In 2 weeks, they'd removed 20 points of chaos because now the whole team saw the mission and saw the process the same way. So all of a sudden, things were just clear that were muddy before. So I don't know if that's exactly what you were looking for, Wayne, but that's the kind of thing that happens almost every time. Anybody else?
Yeah, Rick, thanks. One more question. Can you please give us a quick real-world example of where shifting into CRO culture delivered sustainable return on investment, ROI?
Sure. Well, the first thing is when you shift into the, and I think we're talking about revenue culture, living a revenue culture, you start with the fact that the people you hire believe in your purpose. And they look at that purpose and say, that fulfills me to work on this mission. It doesn't have to be planting trees. It can be about being the best engineering company in Arizona. That's where it can be about helping people, children who need to learn how to use a computer and they've never had one. So when you hire people who are compelled by the brand promise and the problem you solve and the purpose, they will think about ways, they'll be creative, they'll be innovative, they'll be passionate about how do we transfer value to that ideal buyer, because it makes me feel good. Aside from the fact I have a job, I'm getting paid reasonably, I have a career path, I'm pretty confident I'm going to have a job for a long time. All those things help me be happy, motivated, compelled. I think we've all seen the data. Most of our employees are disengaged up to 70% of their workday. But if you hire people where you have a revenue strategy that compels the people you hire, and it also, the value you transfer and compels the buyer to say, those are the people I like to deal with because they believe what I believe. Those of you who are familiar with Simon Sinek's book or videos on why, it's all about people want to do business with people like them, people they trust. And so when you approach this using those 5 questions, you hire people who believe in those 5 questions, and they're passionate about creating and delivering the value that comes from answering those 5 questions. And they're delivering that value to ideal buyers who are excited to get that value that's driven by the same purpose they have. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much for that, Rick. Great stuff. So I don't think there are any more questions my side, and I don't think anyone else has anything else at this point. So on to you.
Okay. Then I guess we're good. We finished within the hour, and I'll hang around a few minutes if anybody wants to stay. But I thank you all very much for joining us.